We need to talk about Lia Thomas, as some recent information has been brought to light, and there are quite a few things to unpack in this video. The topic of trans rights has become highly controversial in the past few years. Not everyone fully believes in trans rights because of some key biological factors. Pointing out these biological factors will often get you labeled as a bigot and a bully.
I'm not into all the other bullshit. I think
What other bullshit?
the they and them.
Yeah.
And all that extra shit that we added during the pandemic because everyone was so bored on their fucking houses. They just started to make up more shit and more shit.
More stuff.
Yeah. That's where the conservatives like me because I'm just real.
Yeah, you do have a conservative
you're not
vibe
they
to
and
you.
them. You're trans, you're male or you're female.
And you're
And
standing on
people
that.
get so mad when I say that. How are you a they? What the fuck does that mean? It's stupid is what it is.
Yeah.
But you need someone like me that looks like me to say it. Because if you say it, it turns into you're homophobic, you hate trans people, you hate gays. And it's just how you feel. You don't hate anyone. You just think it's stupid.
Act as if you're being harassed by an angry mob when the majority of criticism is fair is playing the victim. A person who engages in intimidation, harassment, or other abusive behavior while claiming to be a victim is called a crybully. J.K. Rowling and ex-vegans like Yoga Girl and Elise Parker come to mind. To review, bullying involves a power imbalance, malicious intent, and repetition. J.K. Rowling is a bully as, one, there's a demonstrable power imbalance. She's an incredibly famous cis woman who targets trans people, an oppressed minority, with much smaller platforms. Two, there's repetition. She is constantly targeting trans people on Twitter, resulting in her followers targeting these individuals as well. And three, there's malicious intent. You could argue that she doesn't have malicious intent because she believes that what she's doing is righteous. However, by this logic, you'd have to say that groups like ISIS and the CIA don't have malicious intent because they also believe that what they're doing is righteous. Malicious intent refers to the intent, without just cause or reason, to commit a wrongful act that will result in harm to another. J.K. Rowling fully intends to strip rights away from trans women with her advocacy. She may believe she has just cause or reason, but since she can't actually justify her behavior with sound reasoning, she doesn't have just cause.
This is what is known as TERF, which stands for Transgender Exclusionary Radical Feminist. Ultimately, TERFs aim to define what makes a woman and believe that biology plays a significant role in shaping the female construct, thus affecting who the feminist agenda can or cannot apply to. Many people labeled as TERFs will counter-argue pro-trans activists by stating that they don't wholly exclude trans women's rights from feminist discourse because they include trans men's rights as women's rights. They also argue that the label has become synonymous with transphobia, or fear of trans people, and isn't wholly accurate. Some people labeled as TERFs don't identify as anti-trans and claim to support trans rights but disagree that trans rights should be categorized within the feminist agenda, namely due to assumed biological differences. And speaking of biology and power imbalance, Leah Thomas is much taller and stronger than her fellow teammates and competitors.
Article was posted disclosing that Leah Thomas did in fact formerly swim on the men's team for 3 years. And so I'm reading this and I'm like, wait, so this is a guy? And when I read this, I was shocked, of course, but I truthfully felt relieved because when you look up Will Thomas at this point, you can see that they were ranked 462nd at best.
Yeah, couldn't cut it
in the men's division. And so seeing that on paper, I thought surely the NCAA wouldn't let this person compete with us. But of course, that's not what we saw. And so that first day at our NCAA championships, we all sat on the sidelines as Lia Thomas became the fastest female in the country, winning a national title in the 500 freestyle, beating out, Olympians, American record holders, the fastest females of all time. And that next day was when Leah and I raced each other and we swam the 200 freestyle, and crazily enough, we tied. So when we went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second, which is pretty rare.
Yeah.
And so upon tying, I go behind the awards podium where they give you these like dinky little trophies and they parade you out. But the NCAA official looks at me and says, "Great job, y'all tied. The trophy goes to Leah."
What?
We'll eventually mail you yours. And so I kind of look at him and I quickly question him and I'm like, okay, I understand there's one trophy, don't account for ties, but what's your thought process on giving it to Leah? Why are you so adamant? And he said, well, for photo purposes, Leah has to have it.
Wow. Yeah.
And so obviously I knew what we were dealing with was wrong. What was happening was, I mean,
It's
wild. But it was at this moment that I realized not only were we being forced to compete against a man, 6'4", a man,
Yes.
were we being forced to change in a locker room with a man, we were being sidelined to validate the feelings and the identity of a man. And it just felt like we were reduced to like a photo op. And so that's kind of when I took it upon myself to really become public with my stance and so many other stance.
According to Catherine Klein and many others, bullying and harassment is a power imbalance. Not only does Lia Thomas have an obvious physical power imbalance as a biological male, but let's not ignore the media's clear biased favoritism here. Again, against all odds, Riley Gaines tied with her in competitions. Yet, for the sake of a photo op and virtue signaling, she was not awarded the trophy that she deserved. The other form of power imbalance I would love to point out here is the educational college system.
Who's speaking about this issue, just like I can tell you right here, we're trying to get to the bottom of an issue using rationality, using reason, using common sense. And here there are these silencing tactics being used against you and your teammates. I mean, you talk to other swimmers around the country, like you were just saying, you're talking about sponsors. What sort of tactics are being used to silence these individuals, and who is, leveraging and threatening that?
Well, definitely these universities and the NCAA. In terms of the female swimmers I've talked to, the amount of emotional blackmail that these schools are using, whether that be saying you won't get into grad school if you speak up, you won't be able to compete if you speak up, your school has already made your stance for you. The Ivy League actually sent an email to their swimmers, to which was in a response to the locker room situation. A few of the girls had conspired an email saying, hey, we feel uncomfortable, with some parents involved as well. The Ivy League sent an email back saying, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia in your locker room, here are some counseling resources that you should seek.
Counseling. What a joke.
And then they were referred to the LGBTQ plus education center to educate themselves on the oppression that these athletes are dealing with. Even Leah Thomas's teammate, who I was just talking with, she wrote like an opinion piece for their school newspaper, to which they immediately said, we will not post that. So there's a bunch of different, they had to go to mandatory LGBT whatever meetings every week to educate themselves. And so they were thought to be wrong for feeling uncomfortable in the locker room. They were thought to be hateful and divisive and segregatory and all of these different things because they didn't want to be biologically at an inherent disadvantage to men. And that's why these girls are still silent. They're terrified. They don't want to seek, or they don't want to have to deal with retaliation or all of these different things that these schools made it seem like a real possibility.
Yeah.
It honestly amazes me why people think it's appropriate to have someone with a male genitalia in a women's locker room. Men and women have separate spaces for a reason. As the saying goes, when you are too open-minded, your brain falls out. The dictionary defines indecent exposure as intentional exposure of part of one's body, such as the genitals, in a place where such exposure is likely to be an offense against the generally accepted standards of decency. Women are now just expected to pretend that they don't see a penis because someone claims to be a woman. Women who speak up against this are labeled as transphobic. And in my view, this is just gaslighting, which is psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thought, perception of reality, or memories, and typically leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self-esteem, uncertainty of one's emotional or mental stability, and a dependency on the perpetrator. Or, to simply put it, the act or practice of grossly misleading someone, especially for one's own advantage. In order to compete at a professional level, you obviously have to train hard and practice consistently, especially in the context of swimming, where you must change in and out of a swimsuit. How many times have other women been subjected to seeing Leah's male genitals? I recognize that those who are truly trans suffer from gender dysphoria. When it comes to situations like being in the locker room, would they not be embarrassed by their own body? Wouldn't they at least make some sort of effort to cover themselves? This leads me to the recent Instagram video by Feminist Recovery that is currently going viral.
Of Lia Thomas indicate that he has castrated himself, and he waited until after the swim season, after he was an All-American, and after the FINA ruling said he cannot compete into the Olympics to go ahead and do this surgery. And the announcement was made with these emojis and comments like this. Can I just say that ballless and flawless is like a joke you make about a dog, not a human? But actually, Leah castrating himself is not the strange part of this story. While we were working to verify this story, we learned more about Leah than we ever wanted to know. I apologize in advance for what you're about to see. Leah's smart. All the pictures he posts about himself are squeaky clean. However, the photos he likes, the photos he's tagged in by friends, and the accounts he associates with tell a very different story about a very different Leah. His online interactions indicate that he gets sexually aroused by dressing up as a woman. And his online activity is sprinkled with contempt for women left and right. But I'm gonna give you the examples and you decide. See, Leah likes posts about having sexual fetishes for cross-dressing, like this. He likes posts about how his friends get together and have trans orgies. He likes posts about physically beating women. More than once, by the way. Do you remember Fallon Fox? That trans boxer that broke a woman's skull open and then bragged about it? Well, here's him bragging about it online, and Leah liked the post. And here's Leah liking the defense another time of breaking a woman's skull open. Here's another post that Leah liked. And if you don't speak trans acronyms, please allow me to break this down for you. This reference to AGP means Leah isn't trans to be more of their authentic self. They're trans because it's a sexual turn-on. He gets a sexual response or arousal from cross-dressing. He also likes a lot of photos of other men cross-dressing. I mean, a lot. a lot. You can pause if you want. A lot of photos of men cross-dressing. And he interacts with a lot of accounts about sexploration. I'm not going to show most of those. He even likes photos of his friend practicing paganism or Satanism. And here's his boyfriend who drew Satan with chains around their necks. I'm going to let you completely draw your own conclusion on that one. That's, you decide. He also likes a lot of crass pornographic cartoons, most of which I will not show here. And he has an entire wall of his bedroom dedicated to sex toys. Extreme sex toys. I mean, ball gags and whips and chains and harness. You can see. He's built a sex dungeon with his boyfriend who claims that he's only in open relationships. Which, it makes sense if you're into trans orgies, honestly. And look, if this was just about his personal life and his preference as a gay man and his fetishes, we would have just left it there. But it's not. Leah represents what it means to be an All-American. He has lobbied to be in the women's locker room on the basis that he feels like a woman, not because he has any sexual arousal. He presents himself as a squeaky clean athlete with no ulterior motive. But parents deserve to know there is a darkness about allowing any man into the locker room that claims that they just feel like they should be there. The evidence of him having sexual fetishes abounds. This is a sexual fantasy being played out. And too many moms are wheeling in this Trojan horse into women's locker rooms in the name of compassion, in the name of inclusivity, not realizing that that horse is really just kink and perversion with a big, beautiful bow on it. What Leah has done to his own body is incredibly sad. To obsess over your body to the point where you feel the need to castrate yourself is tragic. The reasons he's done this are at best very sad, and at worst, it's far more sinister and far more perverted. Feminists for many decades understood that women needed a safe space no matter what men said, to protect women from being sexual fantasies or fetishes of men. And Leah has been quite clear that they only wanted to be in the locker room because they felt like a woman. Yet, when Leah's in private, a very, very different story is told.
You are allowed to have a personal life, yet this is in many ways proving my point. In Leah's case, this is an elaborate sexual fantasy being played out. It has nothing to do with inclusion and not much to do with the actual fairness of sports. Lia Thomas soared from a mid-500s ranking in men's competition to one of the top-ranked swimmers in women's competition, tells the story of the unfairness which unfolded at the NCAA level. That alone should be a wake-up call. The thing that no one is willing to point out is how self-serving this all is. Leah and other trans athletes damn well know they are much stronger and faster. They know they can easily win, break records, and earn trophies. They are also aware of how dangerous it is to have men compete against women. Do they care? Nope. If trans people really cared about the fairness and safety of women, they would, for the most part, just stay away from sports.
Today, I want to address the news that the World Surf League has officially made the rule that male-bodied individuals known as transgender athletes can officially compete in the women's division. The World Surf League says they are following the Olympic guidelines. While I address this issue, I want to be clear that I strive to have love for all of mankind, regardless of any differences. But this concerns me as a professional athlete that has been competing in the World Surf League events for the past 15 plus years. And I feel that I must speak up and stand up for those in position that may feel that they cannot say something about this. I think many of the girls currently on tour are not in support with this new rule, and they fear being ostracized if they speak up. So here I go. Questions I have that I want to consider with you. How is this rule playing out in other sports like swimming, running, MMA? Have any of the current surfers in the World Surf League been asked what their thoughts and opinions are on this new rule before it was passed or announced? Should there be a conversation with the 17 women and all of the men on tour prior to a rule change such as this? Is a hormone level an honest and accurate depiction that someone indeed is a male or female? Is it as simple as this? Who is pushing for this huge change? Does this better the sport of surfing? Is this better for the women in surfing? If so, how? How did whoever decided these hormone rules come to the conclusion that 12 months of testing testosterone make it a fair and legal switch? Why is the WSL's statement about trans women competing with women, and yet there's no mention of converted women competing with men? I personally think that the best solution would be to create a different division so that all can have a fair opportunity to showcase their passion and talent. And I think it's really hard to imagine what the future of women's surfing will be like in 15 to 20 years down the road if we move forward allowing this major change. But we are seeing glimpses of male-bodied dominance in women's sports like running, swimming, and others. My hope is that if I ever have a daughter who is competing in surfing or any sport, and also for all the aspiring young generation of women, to have a bright and promising opportunity in her ambition to be the best of the best woman in her sport. I personally won't be competing in or supporting the World Surf League if this rule remains.
It is incredibly unfair that real women are the ones who are having to drop out and lose opportunities. It is also unfair that the few brave women who stand up to this have to face the backlash of being called transphobic. The only solution to this so far is the Women's Boxing Council that has decided to add a trans category for this year. It is the time to do this, and we are doing this because of safety and inclusion. We have been the leaders in rules for women's boxing, so the dangers of a man fighting a woman will never happen because of what we are going to put in place. In boxing, a man fighting a woman must never be accepted regardless of gender change. There should be no gray area around this, and we want to go into it with transparency and the correct decisions. You see, there is a major difference between people who have genuine concerns about the safety and fairness of women's sports versus people who, surprise, surprise, Matt Walsh, who truly are just hateful and actually transphobic. I personally don't really care what an adult does with their body or their sex life, yet all my vegan followers know that personal choices stop being personal when victims are involved. And clearly, other women are strongly affected when it comes to this issue. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and happy Women's History Month.